Estimating with percents is a skill that you probably already use and just don't realize it. Or if you don't currently use it, after today, you'll find yourself using it more and more in real life. To estimate with a percent means that you are rounding the numbers to make them easy to work with in your head. The purpose of this is you can do this without pencil and paper. You're shopping and there is a 20% discount on an item and you can figure that up in your head. Or you're at a restaurant and you're trying to figure out an appropriate tip to leave your server. You can round these numbers to things that are easy to use in your head. So here is a number line showing percentages from 0 to 100%. And understanding which fractions are equivalent to each of those percents will make that easier to use. So with each 10 of a percent, that is 1/10 and a fraction. And then on this third row, I simplified some of these fractions even further. 20% is equivalent to 2 over 10, which is the same thing as 1 over 5. Likewise, 50% is the same thing as 5 out of 10, which is 1/2. You will use that one a lot. Or 80% is 8 over 10, which also simplifies to 4 over 5. So first, let's use fractions to estimate. Something like 48% of 79. I can't do that in my head, and I doubt you can either. But I can get an answer that's in the ballpark. 48% is pretty close to 50%, and we know that 50% is the same thing as 1/2. And 79 could round to 80. There is no magical formula for this. What might be easy in my mind may not be as easy in your mind. We're looking for an answer that is logical, something that's in the ballpark. You will also find yourself using this to kind of check your work when you are finding the actual percent of an answer. So half of 80 is 40. If you were to actually calculate that, you would get 37.92. So 40 is pretty close. If this were a test and I were checking your answers, I would not accept the perfect answer of 37.92 because that means you did not estimate. But I would probably accept anything from 35 to 45. There is not a one cookie cutter answer because, like I said, your brain works a little bit differently from the way my brain does. 20% of 1999. So 20% is the same thing as a fifth, and 1999 could round to about 20. So 1/5 of 20, that means you take 20 and you're splitting it up into 5 equal parts, which would be $4. Now I'm already anticipating, some of you are saying, well, that's just two 10% chunks, and 10% of 20 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. And yes, that is another way that you can do that. We call those simple percents. 1%, you can find 1% of a number by moving the decimal 2 places to the left, or 10% by moving the decimal 1 place to the left. I use this very frequently if I'm shopping and there is a 30% discount on an item. Let's say it was a $40 item and it's 30% off. Well, 10% of 40 is 4, and I have 30% off, which is 3 10s. So 4 times 3 is 12. So there is a $12 discount on that item. So here's an example of 3% of 59. 3% is equal to 3 times 1%, and we know how to find 1%. 59 is about 60. When you see that squiggly equal sign, that means about. It's not exactly equal to, but it is close to that. 1% of 60 is 0.6. I know that because I moved the decimal 2 places to the left as in our directions above. And as I said right here, I have 3 1%. So 3 times 0.6 is 1.8. So 3% of 59 is about 1.8. Here's a real-life application of this. Eric and Selena spent $25.85 for their meal at Outback. About how much should they leave for a 15% tip? So 15%, I could break that down to 10% and 5% in my head. And instead of thinking of $25.85, I'm going to think about that as $26. 10% of 26. As you saw on the previous board, you just move the decimal over one spot. So 10% is $2.60. Now to find 5%. 5% is half of 10%. So half of $2.60 is $1.30. Now I'm going to add these two because we've already said 15% is the same thing as 10% plus 5%. So when I add these, I get $3.90. Now if I were Eric and Selena, I would round that up to $4 at least because I think we should leave our servers generous tips. So let's practice this. Estimate these first three and then answer part D to estimate sales tax. Okay, for part A, 30% is like 3 out of 10, and 86 I rounded to 90, and I saw how those numbers are compatible. So 3/10, so if I took 90 and split that into 10 equal groups, they would be worth 9 each, and I have 3 of those groups. 3 times 9 is 27. Or you could have actually multiplied it as fractions, put 90 over 1, and went that way. On B, I started with 2 over 10, and I was trying to work that with 70, and that wasn't really going well in my head, so I just went with a different method, and that might have went very easily in your head. And I broke 21%. I rounded that to 20%, and that's the same as 2 times 10%. So think of that right there as representing 20% of, and I rounded 68 to 70. 10% of 70 is 7, and I have 2 10%, so 2 times 7 is 14. For part C, 7% of 19. So I started by finding 1% of 20, and if you were watching me, first I wrote that as 0.2, and I was like, wait, that's too big, and I had to go back and correct myself. So that is the same thing as 0.02. I have 7 1%, so 7 times 0.02 is 0.14. For part D, Marcy's shoes cost $39.99. Actually, that's Mark, not Marcy. I'm having a hard time reading it today. About how much would 6% of sales tax be? So 6% can be thought of as 6 times 1%, and $39.99 is about 40. So 1% of 40 would be 0.4 because I moved the decimal 2 spots to the left. So I take that 0.4, multiply it times 6, and I have $2.40. So the sales tax on Mark's shoes would be about $2.40.